Let's analyze the efficiency of the monopoly outcome. And let's take a market like crude oil that could be a competitive market, but instead it's not, actually in reality it's not been entirely monopolized, but the cartel OPEC has a big market share. But let's pretend that it's been entirely monopolized by OPEC. So in the monopoly outcome, we've got this industry marginal cost curve. And if it's monopolized, we have this monopoly marginal revenue function. And we know that the monopoly, a cartel is a group of firms acting together as though they are a monopolist. Very few have been successful because there's a high incentive to cheat. I think we talk about that in the oligopoly chapter. Anyway, there's this price and outcome at PM and QM when the firm is monopolized. If, on the other hand, a competitive industry prevailed in that market, we would get the following result. Price and marginal cost would be equal, we'll call it P sub C, and output would be Q sub C. And what do we see? We notice, actually, let's go ahead and do our quick sector by sector analysis. Consumer surplus, producer surplus, total, and we'll look at competition and monopoly and the change. I'm scrunching a little bit here, but I think I can do it. And I have to letter up my areas, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Notice that under the monopoly outcome, let's start with the competitive outcome. Remember that consumer surplus is the area below the demand curve, above the price, and we're doing the competitive case, so we'll use P sub C. We sum that area up over all the output produced in the case we're examining. So QC would be our output for the competitive case. So we get consumer surplus A, B, C, D, E, and producer surplus F, G, H, and our total is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Had to really scrunch there. Under the monopoly, things look a little different. I'll go back to a black pen. Monopoly, remember, there's just price PM and quantity QM. So we're summing up consumer surplus, producer surplus over a different quantity. So consumers get A, B. Producers get C, D, F, G. And the market ends up with A, B, C, D, F, G. And we can see right away that this market is worse off by areas E, H. And indeed, that's going to be the deadweight loss. Looks sort of familiar to us from other cases we've looked at. That's the deadweight loss of the monopoly outcome. But we can do a little bit better than that, or we can get a little more detail there. Let's pick a different color entirely for the change. We'll just go with orange. Notice that consumers are worse off. They're buying less at a higher price, so they lose C, D, E. That was a surplus they used to have, and now they don't. And producers, actually, they have an interesting situation. On the one hand, they pick up areas C and D. Now they're getting a higher price for what they sell, but they lose an area because they used to sell more output, and they lose this area of surplus. I'm sorry, talking and writing at the same time, always hazardous to my accuracy. They used to pick up this area H as producer surplus, but that's gone. So they get a higher price, but they sell less output. So they're better off because of the higher price. They're worse off because of the lost output. Anyway, we sum these up, and we get a net loss, a deadweight loss of EH. So that's the efficiency cost of monopoly. There's a deadweight loss. This is of a single price monopolist, so as I hope is evident. One thing to say about that it's tempting to say, oh, monopoly is always bad. And we're going to go on and see a couple reasons why this isn't the case. One is just think about patents, copyrights, trademarks, I suppose. These are government-created monopolies. They're not, natural monopolies necessarily, but the government has made this deal to people that develop good products that are potentially useful to people, or great works of art. That's the copyright that are enjoyed by many people. The government has made this deal. If you create a unique product that's new and consumers like it, we're going to give you, for 17 years, we're going to give you the profits associated with producing that product. And why is this so? We know that consumers pay a higher price for less output because of monopoly power. Why would the government do that? Well, here's why. The government grants these monopoly powers, 17 years for a patent. God, it's really long for a copyright. I think it's like 40 years after the author's death or something like that. Anyway, the government is giving the incentive for people to develop desirable products or works of art, and they're saying, look, you do this successfully, you get to keep the rewards for this long amount of time. And to think about why this might be necessary, just think about, say, a pharmaceutical company conducting research to develop a new drug that cures whatever, some terrible disease. Anyway, they have to put in tons of money into developing new drugs, and most of what they develop doesn't pass the testing on animal subjects or human subjects, and it's really expensive to go through the process of testing. So they're sinking huge money into developing a new product. If it were a competitive sector and they were successful at developing a new drug, well, everybody would just imitate them, and the people doing the research are just losers because they've spent the money to research, and the firms that really make out are the ones that just copy them and produce the stuff without having had to research. Well, then nobody has any incentive to conduct research and development. So there's no point talking about the loss of efficiency if we're talking about a market for a good that would not have existed in the absence of that patent or copyright protection. Similar argument holds for copyrights. Well, I can make that argument in 10 seconds. If I wrote the great American novel and then, you were able to just Xerox it and sell it as your own, well, I spent all that time writing it, and you just get this same money I do, or you get this more revenues than I do. You're probably willing to sell it for cheaper, and nobody buys mine. And so I'm just out of luck. I've spent years of my life writing the great American novel, and you're just Xeroxing it off and selling it under your name. And if there were no copyright protection, I'd have no recourse. So what would be the incentive for ever writing the great American novel? Now, people write for the love of writing, but it's hard to eat with the love of writing. We want these artists to be able to make money too.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.